I never believed in parental instinct. I believed in reason, in process, in the idea that if I did things right, everything would be all right. Perhaps that's why I ignored all the early signs, things too small, too illogical to pay attention to, until my son started bleeding from his ear, and I insisted it wasn't his turn yet. My son's name was Aaron, 8 years old. He was thin, quiet, and had a disturbingly strange memory. He remembered the exact dates and times of things no one bothered to record. The last time the neighbors changed the hallway light bulb, the number of steps from our front door to the garbage dump, or the location of every crack in the ceiling. I used to be proud of that. I thought I was raising a smart, just a little eccentric child. I didn't know that his memory wasn't a habit, but a requirement. It all started about 3 weeks before Aaron disappeared. The boy woke up in the middle of the night and said there was someone in the room. No screaming, no crying, just sitting up straight in bed and looking toward the dark corner near the wardrobe. I turned on the light, searched everywhere, and found nothing but dust and the familiar musty smell of the old apartment. I told him it was just a dream. Aaron looked at me for a long time, longer than usual, then nodded as if he knew I would answer that way. Before lying down, he asked me a question that annoyed me for some reason. If a person stands still long enough in the dark, are they still considered a person? I yelled at him to go to sleep. In the nights that followed, Aaron began to remember the things he saw in the room. He said that each night, the person stood a little closer. At first, against the wall. Then next to the desk. Then at the foot of the bed. What chilled me wasn't the story itself, but the fact that he could describe the exact location even with his eyes closed, as if he didn't need to look to know. When I asked why he didn't scream or run to my room, Aaron calmly replied that if he did, the other person would understand they'd been discovered, and then things would happen faster. I began to notice that Aaron wasn't sleeping soundly anymore. His eyes were dark and sunken, his reflexes were slow, and he often startled when someone stood too close. Occasionally, I saw him tilt his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Once, when I touched his shoulder from behind, Aaron cried out in pain and collapsed, as if I had squeezed an open wound. There were deep, evenly spaced, circular bruises on his shoulder, resembling fingertip marks, but much larger. The doctor said it might be from a fall. Aaron immediately shook his head and said the other person tried to pick him up, but wasn't used to it. On the 13th night, I was awakened by whispering in the apartment. It wasn't my son's voice, nor did it sound like any other voice I'd ever heard. It was low, wet, and had a strange rhythm, like someone practicing reading. When I jumped up and opened Aaron's bedroom door, I found him sitting on the floor, his back against the bed, his eyes wide open, staring at me. Blood trickled from his ear, thin but relentless, soaking his pajama collar. Aaron gestured for me to be quiet. I heard breathing right behind me, very close, close enough for me to feel the cold on the back of my neck. Aaron's lips moved, no sound came out, but I read it. Don't turn around. The next morning, Aaron didn't go to school. He said the other person didn't like the sunlight, but that didn't mean it didn't exist during the day. He started drawing. Hundreds of scribbled pencil drawings, all the same shape. A tall, thin body, joints bent out of place, and a head bowed so low that the neck was almost non-existent. In all the drawings, that thing was missing a face. Just a dark, blank space, as if trying to add more detail would tear the paper. When I asked why he didn't draw a face, Aaron replied that if he did, the other person would be complete. The night Aaron disappeared, I heard no screams. Nothing was broken. There were no signs of a struggle. I only woke up because the apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring from the lack of sound. Aaron's bedroom door was wide open. The bed was empty. On the floor were deep, round indentations, arranged in a row, leading from the bed to the front door, as if something had pressed its fingertips down on the floor to drag itself away. On the living room wall, I saw long, thin streaks of blood, not splattered, but swept upwards, forming chaotic curves, like the handwriting of someone unfamiliar with using their hands. The police found nothing. They said there were no signs of forced entry. They asked me about my son's psychological history. They didn't take notes when I described the person in the shadows. They used the word missing in a very light tone, as if it were a concept that could be folded up and put away in a file. 3 days later, I heard footsteps in the apartment at 3 in the morning. It wasn't Aaron's. The footsteps were too slow, each step accompanied by the sound of bones scraping against each other. I didn't dare open my eyes. I felt something stand by my bed for a long time, long enough for me to smell metal and something like stale meat. Then I heard Aaron's voice, very softly, very close to my ear, saying he was sorry for letting me see, but he couldn't take it anymore. When I opened my eyes, no one was there, but new, round indentations appeared on my arm, deepening day by day, as if something was learning to hold me captive. I realized too late that Aaron was never the final target. He was just the chosen one to open the door. And now, as I write these words, I hear that familiar breathing in the room. He doesn't need to hide anymore. He stood in the shadows long enough. And now it's my turn to learn to remember his location, if I want to live another night. My friends Ethan, Caleb, and I were in desperate need of a break. Life had been relentless, and we longed for something different. Something that would get us out of the noise and into the stillness of nature. So, we decided to head to a remote forest known for its eerie reputation. People spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and figures lurking in the shadows. But we scoffed at these tales. We were rational men, after all. My uncle had often joked about the same rumors when I was a child, and I had never once believed them. The road leading to the camping site was rugged, a narrow track barely wide enough for a single car, with no signs of life around. We were far from civilization. No cabins, no houses, no markers of any kind. Our phones lost signal long before we reached the spot. It felt as if the forest had been untouched by man for ages. I noticed this, and a knot formed in my stomach, but I kept my thoughts to myself. I didn't want to be the one who worried for nothing. We quickly set up camp. 2 tents, a campfire, a table we barely used, and settled into the eerie silence around us. The woods seemed peaceful, but it was too quiet. No birds, no animals, no rustling of leaves in the wind. Just silence. I tried to dismiss the feeling creeping into my chest, telling myself it was just a quiet place, nothing more. As the sun dipped below the trees, we sat around the fire, talking about old stories, future plans, and life in general. Caleb was in the middle of a joke about work when Ethan volunteered to get more wood. He grabbed the flashlight without hesitation and ventured into the dark woods. I watched him go, and it felt like a weight dropped in my chest. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but something didn't feel right. Time passed. A few minutes, then 10, then more. I called his name once, then again. The silence stretched out, and I felt my unease grow. Caleb laughed nervously. "He's just messing with us." But I didn't laugh. I stood up, calling out for Ethan. The trees swallowed his flashlight beam, and it was like the forest was swallowing him too. We moved closer to the woods, calling out louder now. Nothing. No response. The forest had become suffocating, a living thing, pressing down on us. The weight of the silence was overwhelming. Then we heard something, a noise deep in the woods. It was low, gurgling, as if someone was trying to speak but couldn't form words. We exchanged uneasy glances and began to move toward the sound. My heart hammered in my chest. Every step felt like it was leading me deeper into something I didn't want to find. And then we did. We found Ethan, but he wasn't the same. He was lying by a fallen tree, his clothes ripped to shreds, his skin battered and bruised. His face was swollen, but in a way that made it look unnatural, wrong. It took everything in me not to panic right there. He was breathing, but it was shallow and erratic. He couldn't focus on us when we spoke to him. His eyes were distant, like he was looking at something far away. With difficulty, we managed to get him back to camp, but every step was agony for him. The pain in his eyes was unbearable. Every time he stumbled, I felt a tightening in my chest. And still, the forest remained unnervingly quiet. Once we got him back to the fire, we wrapped him in a blanket, and the three of us sat in a strange, tense silence. The fire flickered weakly. Caleb looked nervously at the trees, but I didn't need to say anything. He could feel it too. The forest was alive, but not in any way we understood. Then from behind us came the noise again, slow, uneven, like something was moving carefully through the underbrush. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I looked at Caleb. He was staring at Ethan, who was still shaking uncontrollably on the ground. He looked at me, eyes wide with fear. I couldn't stay there, not with whatever was making that sound so close. I stood up, telling Caleb not to move. I grabbed the flashlight and ventured into the trees, my heart in my throat, my every step echoing in my ears. The darkness enveloped me, pressing in on all sides. I forced myself to move forward, despite every instinct telling me to run. And then, through the trees, I saw him. It was Ethan, but it wasn't. His face was clean, his clothes intact, no sign of injury. He stood there, perfectly still, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Ethan," I called out, but my voice sounded too small in the vastness of the woods. He didn't answer right away. He looked confused. Then he started speaking, his words coming out in a rush, panicked. He said he had gotten lost, that something had been chasing him through the woods, something that didn't move right, something unnatural. He said he hid, running until he was sure it was gone. My heart skipped a beat. "We already found you, Ethan," I said. "You're hurt. You're at the camp." His face twisted in terror. "No, I'm right here. It's not me you found. That thing can copy shapes, voices." I froze, staring at him. His voice cracked with fear. He grabbed my arm, his grip weak, his hand trembling. He tried to move faster, but his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed to the ground, breathing hard. I didn't wait. I pulled my arm away and ran. I ran back toward the camp, but my feet felt like they were dragging. The trees seemed to close in around me. When I reached the camp, everything was wrong. The blanket Ethan had been wrapped in was gone, discarded on the ground. The fire was nearly out. Caleb was on his knees, his hands digging into the dirt, crawling backward. And standing over him was Ethan. But not my Ethan. It looked like him. His face, his body, everything, but its movements were wrong. The joints of its limbs bent in impossible ways, its head tilted unnaturally, and its eyes were empty. Caleb screamed, but the sound was cut off as the creature, Ethan, lunged forward, grabbing him by the throat. It crushed him with ease, his legs kicking weakly in the air. I reacted on instinct, grabbing a nearby rock and throwing it at the creature. It hit its shoulder, but it didn't flinch. It simply turned its head, locking eyes with me. The air felt thick, like time itself had slowed. Caleb's body went limp. The creature released him, and then it turned toward me. I stumbled backward, but it was on me in an instant, its weight crushing me to the ground. Its face was inches from mine, wearing Ethan's features stretched grotesquely, its mouth opening wider than it should have. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, through the trees, came the real Ethan's voice. "Caleb, run!" The creature paused, its head jerking toward the sound, its attention shifting. I didn't wait. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back until I was at the edge of the trees, where I found Ethan, the real one. We didn't talk as we ran to the car, as the forest seemed to watch us leave. The car started after what felt like an eternity, and I drove without looking back. Through the rearview mirror, I saw movement, slow and steady, watching us leave, watching us all leave. Caleb was never found. The authorities claimed he got lost. No one bothered to search long enough to find anything else. Ethan survived, but not without a price. He's not the same. He flinches at every sound. Sometimes in the middle of the night, he whispers to me, "I heard it. I heard it. I heard my own voice calling to me when I was hiding." And I know now, the thing in the woods, it's not done. It waits. It knows how to wait. But it won't get me. Not this time. I won't go back. It was the summer before my final year of college, and my cousin Ryan had recently gotten a set of military-grade night vision goggles for his birthday. He was always into gadgets and survival gear, and I was always the curious one. He left the goggles at my place for a few days, and one restless evening I decided to check them out. I had no real plan, other than to wander the nearby Pine Ridge Nature Preserve, hoping to catch a glimpse of nocturnal wildlife. I had been there a few times during the day, but it seemed like a whole new world after dark. The woods were a good 10-minute drive from my apartment, tucked in a secluded part of town, and as a college student, I was accustomed to the quiet. It was a half-moon night, with only a faint light filtering through the dense canopy above. My phone was nearly dead, and honestly, I wasn't thinking too much about anything other than getting away from my small apartment for a while. I parked in the darkened lot by the preserve's entrance, ignoring the sign warning about the park's closing hours. As I grabbed the goggles and my flashlight, I didn't anticipate anything unusual happening. In hindsight, it seems like a reckless decision. A young woman, alone, in the middle of the woods at night. but I thought I was just going for a nature walk. The woods were silent, save for the rustling of leaves underfoot. I used the flashlight to light my way as I walked further into the trees, the faint sound of distant animals making their usual nighttime noises. After a while, I sat down on a large rock to try out the goggles, excited to see what the world looked like in total darkness. Night vision is an incredible thing. Everything around me lit up in shades of green, turning the quiet forest into a bright, almost surreal landscape. I could see small creatures moving between the leaves, rabbits, squirrels, and even an owl perched nearby. For a while, I was caught up in the wonder of it all. But no deer. I had hoped to see a few, so I decided to move deeper into the woods for a better vantage point, something more hidden from the creatures I hoped to spot. After a short hike, I found a massive pine tree with wide, low branches. I loved climbing trees when I was younger, so it was no challenge to haul myself up and settle on a thick branch, waiting quietly. I had no idea that this would be the moment everything changed. What I saw through the goggles sent a cold shiver down my spine. A man, dressed entirely in dark clothing, moving deliberately from tree to tree, barely making a sound. His movements were careful and calculated, like a predator stalking its prey. He wasn't walking casually, he was hunting. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was carrying a large hunting knife, his fingers wrapped tightly around the handle. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't hunting season, and the area was a nature preserve, so there was no reason for anyone to be armed like this. I was too afraid to breathe, watching from the safety of the branches above. He was moving cautiously, glancing around constantly, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was searching for someone. At first, I thought he hadn't noticed me, but then it hit me. The rustling noises I had heard earlier on my way in, I remembered them now. Had he been following me? The flash of a white car that had been tailing me as I drove here resurfaced in my mind, and an icy realization settled in. Could this man be the driver of that car? Had he circled back after I entered the park? My pulse raced as panic set in. I tried to steady my breath, but every movement felt like it might alert him to my presence. The man was so close now, just beneath my tree, scanning the area with methodical precision. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't look up. The night was silent, except for the sound of his footfalls below, and the longer I sat frozen in place, the more convinced I became that he was looking for me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stopped directly under my tree, his gaze lingering near the base of the trunk. My heart nearly stopped. I knew he could see the faint outlines of my feet. The cold grip of fear took hold as I thought, this is it. I'm done for. But then, inexplicably, he muttered, "Forget it," and turned back toward the direction he had come from. I didn't wait for him to change his mind. The moment he was out of sight, I scrambled down the tree and bolted through the woods, praying I wouldn't run into him again. I reached the parking lot, and my worst fears were confirmed. My car was there, but the windshield had been shattered by a large rock, and deep gashes scarred the sides of the vehicle, clear signs of a knife or sharp object. The realization hit me like a wave. If it weren't for those night vision goggles, I would never have seen him before he saw me. If I hadn't found that tree to climb, I might not have made it out at all. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out. The next time I visit those woods, I'll be much more careful, and I'll make sure I'm never alone at night again. It happened on Christmas Day 2 years ago. Every December since, the events replay in my mind, like a nightmare that never fully fades. That year, I was 17, living with my parents in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Washington state. The holiday seemed straight out of a Christmas card. Snow lightly falling, the sky a crisp blue in the morning, and the soft pink hue of the evening sun. Inside, however, chaos reigned. My family goes all out for Christmas. I'm talking about cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. Everyone squeezed into our house, loud and bustling. Kids running around, frosting on their faces, my uncle and grandma arguing over the turkey's seasoning, and Christmas movies playing too quietly in the background. As the quiet one in the family, I usually stuck to the edges, helping with food, pretending to laugh at small talk, and retreating to the kitchen when things got too much. That's when I first saw him. My cousin Rachel walked in with a man I didn't recognize. He was in his mid-30s, much older than her, and his presence seemed to have an unsettling effect. His dark eyes locked onto me the moment he entered. He wore a Christmas sweater, which on anyone else would have seemed festive, but on him, it felt off, like a costume. I was at the counter, slicing some store-bought apple pie when his gaze hit me. It wasn't a casual glance. It felt like a scrutinizing stare, something cold and calculating. I quickly turned my focus back to my plate, feeling uncomfortable. "This is Derek," Rachel introduced him, dragging him over to my mom. "We've been dating for a few months." "Nice to meet you," my mom said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everyone else laughed, but Derek's chuckle sounded forced. I stayed quiet, looking down. But every time I glanced up, his eyes were on me. As the night wore on and everyone moved to the living room for gift exchanges, I found a spot on the floor by the far wall, partly hidden behind the tree, scrolling through my phone. I put in my headphones but didn't play any music. I just needed the escape. Derek, however, kept circling the room. He wasn't mingling. He was watching me. He'd stand just close enough that I could feel his presence, then lean down to start a conversation, pretending to be interested in whatever was near me. "You're Rachel's cousin, right?" he asked at one point, kneeling next to me like we were old friends. I could smell his cologne. Strong, synthetic, and something underneath it, a faint sourness. "Yeah," I replied, barely acknowledging him. "You look different from the rest of them," he said, eyes lingering over my clothes, my hair. "I like your style." It was a compliment, but there was something off about it. I could tell he was just sizing me up, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't answer. Instead, I moved to sit with my younger cousins, hoping to avoid him. But Derek followed, always reappearing just when I thought I'd escaped him. He asked strange questions about my boyfriend, what music I liked, and whether I ever snuck out at night. It wasn't normal, not when it came from a guy pushing 40. The last straw came when I was alone in the hallway, picking at some leftover tape from gift wrapping. Derek stepped into my path, blocking me, and gave me that unsettling smile. "You know, you're going to be trouble when you're older," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "If you're not already." I felt my stomach twist. Everything in me screamed that this was wrong. "If you don't back off," I said, my voice shaking but steady, "I'd tell my parents you're creeping on me." His smile faltered for a second, but then it returned, colder this time. Relax, he said, backing off. I was just joking around. Don't be so serious. I didn't know if I should tell my parents, but the night continued. Rachel looked happy with Derek. Everyone was laughing, and the kids were showing off their new toys. I convinced myself I was overreacting, so I let it go, brushing it off as the evening wore on. By 9:00, the house was quieter. People began leaving, hugs and well wishes all around. I watched from the stairs as Rachel and Derek left. He met my eyes and gave a little wave. I pretended not to see. At 10:30, the house was silent. I went upstairs to my room, thankful the night was over. The snow was still falling, and the view from my window felt like something from a film. I put on my headphones and flopped onto my bed, trying to unwind. But then I heard it. A small tap on the glass behind my head. I froze, heart pounding. I told myself it was just a branch from the snow-laden trees outside. But then, 5 minutes later, the tap came again, louder. I turned and looked at the window. It was fogged from the warmth inside, and I wiped a circle clear with my sleeve. Through the condensation, I saw a figure standing down the street. His posture was slightly hunched, like he had been standing there for a while. His head tilted slightly upward, his eyes locked on mine. It was Derek. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. My body felt frozen in place as I quickly shut the blinds and turned off the light. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything. But I stayed there, peeking through the blinds every few minutes, hoping it was a mistake. For half an hour, I saw nothing, but then the figure was back. Derek Dorr. He was still standing there, just beyond the street lamp's glow, his head tilted upward, staring at my window. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was pounding in my chest as I ran downstairs, yelling for my dad. Somebody's at my window. My dad, half asleep, didn't waste any time. He grabbed his gun from the safe and a flashlight and headed out the back door. My mom called 911, her hands shaking. I stayed at the top of the stairs, watching through the window. In the yard, the beam of my dad's flashlight cut through the darkness, landing on Derek, just standing there in the snow. No gloves, no hat. His breath fogged the air. "What the hell are you doing here?" my dad shouted. I need to talk to her," Derek said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Talk to my daughter at midnight," my dad growled. Derek laughed, but it was that same empty, rehearsed laugh from earlier. "She's special. I love her. I want to marry her. You can sign for her, right? Parental consent. That's all it takes." My mom gasped, covering her mouth. My dad exploded in anger, charging at Derek. He tackled him into the snow, pinning him down with his knee. "I'll call the cops," my mom whispered, but she already had her phone out, dialing. When the police arrived, they pulled Derek off the ground, cuffing him and checking his pockets. My heart finally started to slow as I watched from the window. The cops found several bags of meth, fake IDs, and even some disturbing items, stuff I didn't want to think about. They loaded him into the squad car, and the officers gave me a silent nod, a look that told me I had done the right thing. Derek was arrested that night and taken away. My cousin Rachel broke up with him immediately and severed all ties. He was a stranger to all of us, and the only thing that kept me from the same fate as countless other girls was trusting my gut. That Christmas could have ended very differently, but I'm still here, thankful that I didn't second-guess myself when it mattered most. Under the light of a new moon, the clouds were as thin as gauze. The dirt road leading into the forest was so quiet that the sound of dry leaves sounded like bones scraping against each other. Alex walked ahead, the flashlight hanging from his backpack swaying, cutting a thin line of light through the fog. Maya followed closely behind, her hands cold, each step like she had to be pulled out of the mud. Leo walked behind, tripod and camera bag slung over his shoulder, his eyes deep but alert, scanning the surroundings like a sentry, silently counting his breaths to keep calm. They had read the worn-out diary, an anonymous priest written in blotchy reddish-brown ink about a village forgotten because of its debt to shadows. Maya stopped abruptly, grabbing Alex's sleeve. Do you feel it? Like someone hungry? Alex laughed, reassuringly in a light voice.
I don't know, guys. I'm getting a really bad feeling
Perfect
about
for a
this.
Halloween video. He raised the camera, panning around. Fog, trees, darkness. The lens caught a few specks of dust that shone like fireflies, or other things, small and staring back. Then the village appeared without warning, without a single light, without a puff of smoke. Only the air was heavy as a stone pressing on the chest. In front of the village gate, a rickety sign hung by a rusty string. Alex brought the flashlight closer. Burned black words were etched into the wood. The unharvested shadows will find the curious. Maya took a step back. Alex smiled again, but his eyes were trembling. He pushed the gate open. The hinges made a long, screeching sound, like someone sucking in a breath to contain the pain. Inside, the village streets were filled with mud and leaves. The doors were half open, like cave entrances. Alex led the group into the first house, its wooden floors creaking. The musty smell mixed with the smell of burning incense crept into Maya's nose, making her cough slightly. On the table, an overturned earthenware bowl still lay. Alex flipped the bowl over. Below was a black and white photograph, blurry and cracked. A group of people in brown shirts, holding sickles, standing in the middle of a rice field that had been harvested to the stump. Leaving the house, they walked deeper. Every strange sound began to creep around them, light footsteps behind them. But when they turned around, there was only mist, sighs from the abandoned well, whispers mixed in the wind, like many voices overlapping. Not harvested yet. Alex leaned into each door, panting with hunting instinct. Blurred figures began to touch the edges of the frame, just the corners of eyes. But Maya could clearly see a pair of eyes red as burning coals peering through. She grabbed Alex's hand so hard it hurt. Alex, stop. It's a trap. Alex stubbornly. I just need a few more shots. Suddenly, a window banged as if someone had crashed into it. All three spun. Behind the cracked glass, a face appeared for a moment. Hollow, eyes two dark red holes, mouth open but making no sound, then suddenly gone. Alex dropped the camera to the floor, the indicator light still flashing. They gathered their things and ran to the middle of the village. There, a small square led into many crisscrossing alleys. Houses on both sides changed positions. Windows seemed to turn to watch them. Leo counted his steps, but the count kept slipping away, as if someone had broken the numbers in his head. A hand reached out from the void and grabbed Leo's wrist. Leo jerked, jumped back, the other hand flailing reflexively, leaving 5 long purple marks on his skin, like the marks of fingers without flesh. They were lost in a corridor, in the village. Maya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, trying to find a beat other than her own. and she heard it. Under her feet, in the ground, something moving. Like many hands crawling, searching for calves, ankles. "Don't stand still," Maya whispered. "They can pull if we stand still." They continued walking, and then the corridor suddenly opened in front of a small church, the bell tower broken in half, the clock face frozen at 3:13. Alex pushed the door. The smell of burnt incense came like a wave. On the altar, portraits were pasted on top of each other. Peasant faces, dark eyes, gentle but deep down were tired and resentful. Some of the photos were torn, revealing behind them were old words. Called to pay rice tax, didn't return. Strange disease after harvest. Missing in the well. The paper shook even though there was no wind. A dry bell rang from the broken tower, not knowing who had rung it. The candles in the church flickered, then flared up a little before going out. Maya held her head. "They're coming!" Leo grabbed Alex's shoulder. "Go, now!" But the crescent moon suddenly rushed out from behind the clouds, casting silver light on the broken window. And as the moonlight touched the church floor, from the dark corners, figures began to step out. A figure approached Alex, reaching out to touch his collar. He was lifted, his feet kicking into the air, a scream stuck in his throat as if swallowed by the thick air. The smell of corpses and incense smoke mixed with the smell of burning straw lingered around. Alex was mumbling, his hands flailing. Leo let out a low growl, lunged forward, grabbed Alex's stomach, and pulled him back. He felt those dry, scratched fingers dig into Alex's skin like hooks. He pulled hard. Alex's body fell into Leo's hands like a sandbag, both of them rolling down the church steps. Maya, still holding her head, suddenly opened her eyes, grabbed the metal bracelet, put it on Alex's wrist, her hands trembling. "Alex, the number, the document in the diary." Alex gasped. He rummaged through his backpack and pulled out a piece of paper marked with a marker. On it, under the phrase, "Do not call their names," there was a short, hastily written and ugly verse. "The shadow demands its share. The person returns the favor. The black fire shines, the boundary opens. When the moon is a scythe, place the ring between the shadow and the bone. When the..." Maya recited in a whisper. She placed the Jiamchio ring in the space between the three people and the shadows. The ring did not touch the ground. It hung there, as if tied to something invisible. A very soft crack, like a tight string being cut. A few shadows dissolved like smoke. Only their red eyes fell like upside-down fireflies, extinguished in the air. The wall cracked open like a mouth. Portraits pasted on the wall fell out, flying around in the wind that came from nowhere. Breathing, the sound of wood groaning, the sound of people screaming from the ground. The passages outside, seen through the windows, seemed to change places, retreating when someone tried to step forward, sliding like the surface of water. "Not long enough. Just hold them. A little," Maya said, her eyes not leaving the circle. Leo lifted Alex up. "Which way?" Maya closed her eyes, feeling. Everything was like a moving maze, but there was a rhythm. The rhythm of the forest. She opened her eyes, pointing towards the side door of the church. They rushed out. The circle of judgment drifted along, following Alex like a black bird. Shadows spread out from both sides of the alley. A dry hand jumped up from the ground, grabbed Alex's ankle. He almost fell. Leo bent down and hit hard. The hand shattered into cold ash. "Don't stand still." Maya, reminded. The shadows rushed forward, not slow this time. The circle of judgment shook, emitting a sound like metal rubbing against stone. Maya read the awkward words again, her voice starting to break. The largest shadow, probably the shadow of the old village chief from years ago, stretched out, its eyes red like two pieces of hot iron. It touched the edge of the circle and cried out. It took a step back, just one, but enough for the three of them to break free of the encirclement, dash through the broken fence, trample on rotting leaves, and breathe in the forest air. Leo ran ahead, then Alex, Maya. Behind them, the village stretched out, trying to hold them back with the alleys sliding under their feet. The wind came. The mist in the village was whipped back like a curtain. The shadows at the edges couldn't get through, their red eyes burning, then fading like dying embers. A long, long sigh, as if the whole village were exhaling. They didn't stop until they were deep in the forest. Leo plopped down, his back against the tree trunk. His hands were shaking, but his eyes were still alert. Alex put the camera on his lap, the light still flashing. I got it, he said, unsure. Maya hugged her knees, put her chin on them, inhaled the smell of damp leaves like medicine. We're out, she whispered. Temporarily. A week later, on Halloween night, Alex sat in his rented room, the window ajar, the sound of cars in the distance like a hazy river. He turned on the camera, reviewed the footage. In the frame, the fog shimmered beautifully like an effect. The door closed by itself, the window slammed shut, the hallway seemed to stretch out. Everything was there. The circle of judgment appeared in a few frames, black like a hole in the image. There was a very light knock on the door. He looked up. No one. In the silence, a very soft sigh passed by, as if coming from the corner of the wall. Alex stood up, walked to the window, pulled the curtains. Outside on the street, people were laughing, dressing up. Cheap witch and vampire masks danced under the neon lights. When he pulled the curtains back, in the reflection on the glass, Alex saw that behind him there was not only his shadow, there was also a thin, flat, long black streak, like a scythe leaning against the corner of the room. He turned around. The corner of the room was empty. Alex thought to himself, stress. The phone vibrated. A message from Maya. Are you listening tonight? Alex was about to reply, listen to what, when he heard it. In the sound of the wind seeping through the crack of the door, an old sound crept into the room. Tired but persistent. Not harvested yet. Leo texted the group. Don't be alone. Lock the door. Alex looked up at the door lock. It was still locked. Then he looked at the floor. There were a few small black dust particles, like ash, lying in a semicircle at the threshold. The circle of the orb had fallen back at the edge of the forest that night. But here, something had left the mark of another circle. Alex opened the cupboard, looked for the priest's diary. On the last page, under the red-brown ink, there was a new line. The ink still wet, the smell of burnt incense lingering. They can't harvest the body. They will wait for the soul. He took a step back. In his mind flashed that red eye. The circle of the guardians may be temporary, but the border is real. He texted back, come to my place tonight. Stay. Stay. Maya replied with a moon icon. Leo replied, I brought the rope. Alex smiled, half believing. What was the rope for? But then he remembered the moment they'd grabbed each other in the church. Perhaps that very bond was the only thing the shadow couldn't cut. Outside the window, Halloween bustled and then faded. Inside, 3 people sat side by side, candles placed around them, salt sprinkled on the threshold in a circle toward the window. "If they need a way out, give them a way out, not in," Maya whispered. Leo tied the rope around the 3 people's wrists, linking them like another circle, made of material so ordinary that even ghosts despised it. But ordinary is hard to break. Near midnight, when the new moon pierced the clouds once more, the whisper came again, clearer, as if someone was standing close to their ear. "Not harvested yet." Alex took a deep breath. "We are not your fields. You have been taken. We do not pay with us. If necessary, we will tell. We will name what happened." Maya nodded, eyes closed as if listening. Leo gently tightened the rope. The whisper receded a little, like an old man turning away, disappointed and relieved. The candlelight swayed, then stopped. At the doorway, the half circle of black ash faded, giving way to the yellow dust particles of the street. They fell asleep as the sky neared dawn. In his dream, Alex saw that field again. The harvesters bowed their heads, the horizon blurred like a stain. But this time, when he looked up, at the edge of the field was a small black line, thin as a thread, the forest. Many years later, every Halloween season, in university clubs or video channels, the story of the Golden Eye. It was rumored that every 100 years, the village opened its doors to harvest souls. Some people said they saw flashlights swaying in the mist. Some heard whispers like thin knives cutting through the wind. Alex, Maya, Leo did not return. They promised each other, if one day they needed to, they would go together and only together. They still heard the very light sighs in the windy night, like endless memories. But somewhere deep in the forest, the village still lay there. The houses changing places like board chess pieces. The cracked statue looked down at the dry hands crawling across the brick floor. The crescent moon occasionally turned into a scythe, licking the bright line on the warning board in front of the gate. The unharvested shadows will find the curious. And it seemed, somewhere in the shadows, a black circle still hovered, waiting for the right person to place it between the shadow and the bone. Because the border only exists when someone stands there to say, "Enough." It was already 10 o'clock at night. Nurse Mira was making her rounds in the old psychiatric hospital. This was her first night shift in this eerie building. While walking down the dimly lit corridor, she reached room number 13. Mira slowly placed her hand on the rusty doorknob. Inside lay a 22-year-old woman. A pale but strikingly beautiful girl sat on the bed, facing the cracked wall. Her lips moved slowly, whispering words no one could understand. The strange stillness inside the room made Mira's chest tighten. Her legs hesitated at the threshold, as if something unseen was pulling her back. She had heard stories of unusual patients here, some violent, some completely lost in their own worlds. But this was different. It was her first night here. The ticking of the old wall clock and the sound of the wind scraping against the window frames made the corridor feel even colder. Mira gripped her flashlight, wondering if she should step in. Gathering a bit of courage, Mira finally pushed the door open wider. The moment she stepped inside, the girl suddenly let out a chilling laugh and began twisting her body in unnatural ways. She was still facing the wall, but her neck turned all the way around to look at Mira. Cold sweat dripped from Mira's forehead. Her hands trembled as she backed away. Slamming the door shut, she ran down the corridor to the reception, calling for another nurse. Nurse Lena was at the desk, speaking on the phone. Yes, madam. Don't worry. She's safe. We're taking good care of her, Lena assured someone before hanging up. Seeing Mira's pale face, Lena frowned. What happened, Mira? Why do you look so terrified? Mira stammered and recounted everything she had just seen. Lena nodded slowly. Oh, room number 13. That's Aisha. Her mother calls every night, sometimes every few minutes, to ask about her. They admitted her here 2 months ago and never came back. Mira's curiosity burned through her fear. What happened to her? How did she end up like this? Lena sighed and began to explain. Aisha was 22, a top student in her final year of architecture. Everyone admired her beauty and intelligence. But she lived in a dream world of her own making. She believed she would meet a mysterious artist, her soulmate, and rejected every suitor her parents brought home. She wrote about him in her journal every night, filling page with fantasies. Her parents thought it was harmless. Lena continued. One night, Aisha left her journal at the university library. A young man named Arav, one of her new classmates, found it and took it. He read every page, learning all her secrets and fantasies. The next day, he came to class wearing exactly the clothes she had described for her dream man. Aisha was drawn to him instantly. She forgot about the missing journal, believing she had finally met the man. Their relationship turned intense, even obsessive. Arav isolated her from her friends, especially from Rohan, her best friend who had loved her in silence. He began writing her name in blood, sending letters smeared with it, whispering strange things about destiny. Aisha became frightened, but she couldn't escape. One evening, when she visited Arav's apartment, she found her missing journal there, along with photos of several women. As she stared in shock, a middle-aged man entered the room. Don't be afraid. I'm Prakash, Arav's uncle. He's been unwell since his parents died. He collects things he finds beautiful. People, objects, anything. He doesn't understand emotions. If something he treasures breaks or disappoints him, he destroys it. Aisha is shocked to hear that he's battling illness. She goes over and asks, "What did you say, mentally ill?" Arav's uncle says yes. Aisha's heart stopped when she saw one of the photos, her own face pinned on the wall among other girls. The truth hit her. She ran out, shaking, and locked herself in her room for days, ignoring Arav's endless calls. Hearing this, Aisha was completely shaken to the core. Showing the photos lying in the drawer to her uncle, she asks, "Whose photos are these?" Uncle says, "These are pictures of Arav's first girlfriend. I've met all of them. I've only met her once. Every time I'd see a new girl with him. I don't know what happened to her. I never asked his anything because the doctor had told me not to talk to Arav about anything that might anger him. Otherwise, he might do anything in a fit of rage." Aisha was looking at those photos. Although all of them had one thing in common. All the girls in those pictures were extremely beautiful. There was another photo on that door. Picked up the photo with her trembling hands and began to look at it. Aisha's eyes widened in surprise at the sight of that photo. The photo wasn't anyone else's, but it was her own. Seeing her photo on that door, Aisha felt goosebumps all over her body. Slowly, Aisha began to understand everything. Aisha couldn't bear it anymore. She ran home and closed the door of her room and sat in a corner. She wanted to scream loudly, but no sound came from her mouth. I couldn't get out. She was just standing there when her phone started ringing. It was Arav calling. 101 rings. Even after Aisha didn't pick up the phone, she no longer had the courage to talk to him. Many days passed. Aisha didn't go to college. She didn't meet anyone, nor did she talk to anyone. She just closed the door to her room. She sat alone, staring at her diary. Today, for the first time, she started hating her diary. A week later, the newspaper carried a grim headline. Young man jumps from building after girl rejects him. Arav's photograph stared back at her from the front page. From that day on, Aisha stopped speaking. She sat in her room for hours, whispering to the walls, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. Mira shivered as Lena's story ended. The flickering hospital lights dimmed and then went out completely. The corridor fell into darkness. Mira fumbled for her phone. "Lena, are you here?" she whispered. But there was no answer. On the desk lay a hastily scribbled note. "Emergency call. Had to leave. Back in an hour." Mira's heart thudded in her chest. She turned slowly and saw a shadow moving in the corner of the corridor. A tall figure stepped out, smiling crookedly, his eyes glinting like cold steel. "You're beautiful too," he whispered. "Beautiful things belong only to me." He began to laugh, low at first, then louder and louder, echoing down the hallway. Mira froze where she stood. There was a huge difference between the world of dreams and the world of reality. Sometimes that difference can kill.